All right, welcome back everybody. I'm going to make another video here. This is going to be somewhat of a complicated one. This is going to go through my entire pre-market planning process. This is a process that I have developed over the last 8 trading years, a culmination of kind of all my knowledge for the purpose of building out a daily plan for day trading. In the futures market specifically, I day trade the micro NASDAQ. This would also work for the S&P 500. But for anyone that's really interested in really short-term trading, this is my planning process prior to trading. Every single day, I come up with a plan prior to trading, and then I work to execute that plan. Now, this is a video that is going to have to leave out quite a bit of information. I'm not going to get into the specifics of how to read supply and demand, how to read volume profile. Those are things that you're going to need to find out on your own. This is just going to be a culmination of all of the tools and techniques and analysis that I have used over the years, coming into a streamlined planning process that we can utilize. Now, unfortunately, online, a lot of people make trading seem like it's super easy, that this is something that you can get rich quick on. This is an extremely difficult industry, and it's something that takes a lot of planning. So if this is something that you're interested in, you want to be a day trader, just know this takes years of experience and practice to even have the chance of really getting good at. So this kind of goes into those years of experience personally and what has worked for me. So fundamentally, I am a supply and demand trader. I started off at the Trading Academy, and I'm actually one of the instructors at the Trading Academy now as well. And that is the foundation of my trading strategy, is using supply and demand zones, and looking at market structure and trend. And I also go into volume analytics as well. Okay. So my entire process for trading the NASDAQ, that's what I trade now. It's really kind of 3 schools of thought. It is price action, looking at a candlestick chart, and that's going to provide context and location. So context, I'm talking about market structure. Are we in a trending market state, a balanced market state? And location, where are supply and demand zones? That's what I'm going to find through price action. All right. Then I get into volume analytics in my pre-market planning process, and I take a look at volume profile on individual sessions, over whole ranges, things of that nature, and then how I execute trades after finding context and location and developing a plan is that I use order flow for confirmation for executing my trades. All right. But I'm not going to get into that side of things in this video here. Okay. So my entire pre-market planning process is top-down analysis. I'll start on a price chart, on a candlestick chart, and I'll start on a daily time frame. I'll go down to a 4-hour, then a 1-hour, then a 15, and a 5. All right. So since I am going to be trading on very low time frames, my executions happen on either 1-minute charts or below 1-minute charts. My trades usually last anywhere from 5 to 30 minutes. The winning trades, the losing trades get stopped out very quickly. And this is the kind of thing that this is the way I like to trade. All right. So I like to do all my planning before market open. I like to trade the New York Open, and I usually will trade for the first 2 hours or so, and usually that's when I'll find my opportunities if the markets do have some volatility and are moving a little bit. All right, and so that's what this plan is for. Okay, on each time frame, when I'm looking at price, I'm going to identify market structure, trend and or balance, and then I'm going to identify relevant levels of supply and demand. I'm going to also identify any key levels that I see that the market is reacting to, and I'm going to start isolating ranges with a volume profile. Okay, and then after that, I'm going to check prior New York session volume profiles for additional context and areas of interest. I'm going to observe the overnight trading for additional context. I'm going to check for any major economic reports that are being released that day. And then with all of that in mind, all of that analysis that I have done prior to market open, I'm going to make notes of everything that I see. And then I'm going to develop a bullish and bearish game plan around my observations. Okay. So it is a lengthy process. This it comes with years and years of experience doing this, but this is how you can be a surgeon in these markets, be really, really accurate, and find opportunities pretty much every day with a high degree of success. Very few losing days in my trading months now, but of course they still do happen. But overall, the this entire process has made me very, very accurate in the markets, and I will just kind of go through it with you guys. So it may seem a little overwhelming if you are a newer trader, but hey, that's day trading, so get used to it. Okay, so this is the NASDAQ here, and I'm looking at the front month contract. I'm looking at the daily chart. Starting from the daily time frame perspective, I am just looking at the overall market structure and market state. I'm not really too interested in daily levels of supply and demand unless they're super relevant, just because I'm going to be day trading. Each one of these candlesticks represents a day's worth of trading data, which means that I'm going to be trading inside of one of these candlesticks here, right? Inside of one of these candlesticks, okay? So daily time frame perspective is very sideways. So what I'd want to do is I'd want to go ahead and make notes of that first, all right? So we have the MNQ, and then I'm going to say the daily trend is sideways or balanced, okay? And then there's not really too much else I need to do on this time frame. If you want to start isolating some ranges with a volume profile to get more context, you can, but I just am curious about what is the overall structure of the markets, okay? Now, one of the interesting things I can notice here is that we are shifting value in a downward direction currently. So even though the markets are relatively balanced, I can already tell that we are shifting value lower in this market, right? So value is shifting lower. So relatively more bearish in the markets overall, but overall very, very sideways, okay? Now I'm going to go to the 4-hour chart here, all right? And then from a 4-hour time frame perspective, this is where I'm going to start doing the same sort of observations. Now, if I just take a look at this market structure here, I am very, very sideways still, okay? And then from this time frame perspective, I'm going to also make notes of that sideways market structure, and I'm going to mark out any major levels of supply or demand. All right, so I can see a clear level of demand below current price on the 4-hour chart, and I'm just going to mark that off, and then I'm going to label it 4-hour, okay? And then there is another level of supply back here, which the market has been respecting. And those are going to be my higher time frame levels of supply and demand, okay? Not too much else to do on here, but what I would want to do here is make notes, all right? So I say daily sideways, I got the 4-hour sideways, and then you could put in the major levels of supply and demand. So you got your demand zone at, and we'll have to check on those price levels here. It's 24,420, 24,420, and supply zone at 25,390. All right. Okay. All right, so then I'm going to start dropping down again in time frame now. Now, before I do, since I see that we are currently trading inside of this 4-hour sideways market, what I'm going to do is I'm going to isolate this sideways range with a volume profile, okay? Because when we're trading, we have to understand that there's different market conditions. There's trending market conditions and balanced market conditions, and how you trade in those conditions is completely different. You'll have to watch some of my prior videos on that to get familiar with that. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use an anchored volume profile, and I am going to anchor that profile from before that range starts. If we're just looking at price, it looks like this entire thing is the range here. So I'm going to isolate that range with a volume profile, just anchoring it right before it starts so I can get a distribution of the volume. And this is going to give me a much clearer idea of where the true extremes of this range actually are, all right? Because what we're seeing right now in this balanced market state is that the majority of transactions are actually happening in the middle here. And then we can see that at the extremes, is this is where we get mean reversion. All right, so goes into a balanced market state. Okay, so then I would also want to make notes of that I have a 4-hour sideways range. I have the value area high, value area low, and the point of control. All right, so I'm going to mark off all those levels and make notes of those as well as I go along. So we got 25,170 as the value area high. The value area high. And then we have, it looks like 24,640. 24,640 as the value area low. And then we have the POC looking like it's at 24,835. Okay, so there's quite a bit more information on the 4-hour chart now for me, and this is going to be the range that I'm going to be trading in this week, realistically. All right, already traded this today, caught some nice shorts on this. We faded the extremes up at the high. All right, and that was part of the planning process today. Okay, all right, so now I'm going to stair step down even further. Once again, I'm going to go to the 1-hour chart, and then from the 1-hour chart, what I'm going to actually start to do from the 1-hour chart is I'm going to turn volume by time on the bottom. All right. Since I'm trading the New York session, the patterns of volume in this market stay pretty congruent. Is that the highest volume comes in during the New York session, and then you have low volume that happens overnight. Any levels of supply and demand that were formed overnight are not nearly as relevant to me as supply and demand zones that were formed during prior New York sessions, all right? Because that's going to be an equivalent amount of volume and participation. So usually when New York money comes into the market, we can just blast through levels of supply and demand that were formed overnight under most circumstances. So I don't see any major supply zones. There's a little bit of supply in this market from yesterday. We could mark that off up here as a 1-hour. And then we have a demand zone down below, a little bit lower here, okay? And lo and behold, both of these zones are at the extremes of our sideways range, which is typically where we want to be trading anyway. So these are going to be high levels of interest here, okay? High levels of interest for me. Okay, and both of those zones were formed during prior New York sessions. I can see that because I can just match volume up with those levels and see that both of those levels were formed during prior New York sessions, all right? Prior New York sessions, okay? We can widen this one up a little bit. Okay, so we have the 1-hour supply zone, 1-hour demand zone, and then from this time frame perspective, we have a push up and a sideways market at the top up here. I might want to isolate that sideways range, but I can do that on a 15-minute chart as well, okay? So now I'm going to make notes, and I'm going to start stair stepping down even more, all right? So I see the 1-hour is still sideways in my opinion. And we have a DZ, demand zone, at 24, we'll call it 660, 650, yeah, 24, 660. And then we have a supply zone at 25, we'll call it 150. Okay. And now I'm going to go down to my lower time frame again. All right. So now I'm going to go down to the 15-minute chart. The 15-minute chart is where things get a little bit more interesting for me because this is going to go into the planning process here. Okay. Now, what I can clearly see in this market structure right now in this state is that we have this sideways range at the moment, right? We're coming down to the 4-hour point of control. We are rejecting the value area high of that 4-hour sideways market, but then we have this little mini sideways range in here as well. Now, I will take into account the overnight trading when I'm looking at this stuff. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to just isolate that sideways range. All right, I'm going to isolate this entire sideways range, and that's going to give me an idea of the spread of volume and distribution here for potential interesting levels. Now, on this time frame as well, I like to highlight the overnight trading sessions. The overnight trading sessions, a lot of times end up being trap areas. So if you can highlight the, excuse me. So sorry about that. I had a little hair in my throat. So, okay, I want to take a look at the overnight trading, the overnight highs and lows, just see if there's any sort of relevant levels of supply or demand on this time frame. I want to take a look at the overnight trading. I also take a look at the volume weighted average price. From this perspective, I really don't see anything all that interesting. And then I may hop down to the 5. So from this time frame perspective, I'm just going to say, look, we have a sideways market. There's no additional levels of supply or demand. We do have a little bit of a demand zone down here right next to the 1 hour. You could just incorporate that in your 1 hour zone and widen that up a little bit. And that's going to be an area of interest. So you're more than welcome to do something like that if they're really close to each other and just modify those levels ever so slightly. Okay. So from this time frame perspective, the 15-minute is sideways. All right. And there's nothing else to say about it, okay? And then the 5-minute, I'm not really too concerned about the trend on the 5-minute chart, but if there are any additional levels of supply or demand, especially for prior New York sessions, those become pretty important, all right? So for instance, today, on the trading session today, now we had this 1 hour up above. We could have even refined this area even more for a sniper entry, where we see that there's inside of the 1 hour is a little 5-minute level of supply. All right, and then we can see clearly today, boom, hits that. That was at the high of the range. Really nice trade down to the low of the range of the sideways the sideways market. Now there was a demand zone down here as well, and that was actually a trade that we also took today as well. All right. So we're able to catch some of the short and then get out of that short, and then we were able to get long for a nice little move. But now the market is starting to break down through this level, and it's starting to become a little bit less relevant. All right, so I'm not going to keep that in there anymore, and I don't really see any additional levels of supply or demand either. So there's really nothing to do on the 5-minute chart. Okay, so for instance. Now we're coming into, I'm doing this video after the trading session today, which if you look at the 5-minute just looks like an absolute mess, but there was good opportunities if you knew how to spot them and knew how to plan for them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just back this up here, all right, ever so slightly, coming into market open, all right, so coming into market open here, all right. So this was our view of the markets coming into market open, and I can go back to a 15 even here. So our view of the markets coming into market open. And this is our playground, okay? So now we would want to potentially create some plans for trading this market today, all right? So with everything in mind, we have the greater 4-hour sideways market, all right? We have a little mini 15-minute sideways market in between it as well, all right? Now we have hit. Yesterday, prices came up and we stretched outside of the value area high of the 4-hour, and we saw a little snapback inside of the range, okay? So this is all good and all, but what I want to do is definitely check in on prior New York session volume profiles as well, all right? So what I do for that is that I will take a look at just a chart with just volume profiles here. All right, and then you can see here a little bit more clearly the picture and the story of the market. So this is just New York session volume profiles. Here's that 4-hour range. We even have today's trading session, the Wednesday, in here. But we can see kind of the clear picture and story of the market. So when we stretched outside of value, there was a return back into value. And then yesterday, we stretched outside of the value area high once again. And we put in this tail on the New York session volume profile. If we really zoom in on that, you can see it a lot better. We put in this tail, and the value area high on that New York session, all right, was now aligning with the value area high of the entire 4-hour distribution as well. Okay. So then what we can see is that there was very little volume transacted, showing that there was a clear rejection of price. So coming into this next day, that would have been a very interesting level of interest. All right. Then down at the point of control, we also saw that this was an area of extreme discount as well for these buyers, right? There might be a little bit of support here. Overall, we are leaving potentially the high of the range, and we're coming back down into the mean. So if you're not sure how to trade sideways markets or read a volume profile, you're going to have to watch one of my other videos. Otherwise, this video will be hours and hours long. I am putting together an entire full masterclass on all of this stuff for the academy I work for currently. Okay, but I had some levels of interest from the prior New York session. Nothing else that's really too relevant in this profile shape right now, other than we are just rotating back and forth in this overall sideways range. All right, so with that in mind, we take a look at our New York session coming into the day, and then we would come up with a game plan on the day here. Okay. So then what we'd want to do is develop some bullish and bearish scenarios, okay? I can see my little mini distribution from the prior day, the overnight trading, and coming into this New York session. I have a 1-hour supply zone above, and then I also had that 5-minute demand zone below, right? I had that 5-minute demand zone below. We can see that price clearly caught that level, overnight, and was holding that level very well overall. Okay, so I'm going to include that in my plan, and so I could say there's a 5-minute demand zone in my notes as well. Okay, 5-minute, and we could say we have the DZ at we'll call that 24,931. 931, and we have that supply zone inside of the 1-hour supply zone, and that was up at that was up at, we'll call that 25,155. Okay, all right, so now I have an entire story, and I have some levels, some key levels kind of marked out. I can see how the market is trading, and I'm taking a look at the observations and the story of this picture, okay? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start making some notes, okay? And making just relevant notes to my trading, all right? I want to check in on any news events that are also happening on this day. Now, all the news events that happened on Wednesday, they happened before market open, an hour before market open, okay? So that's where we saw that big spike of volume happening here, right before market open on this. And then into the open, we see that sort of continuation. So I don't have to worry about any additional news events, but then this is kind of the structure of how I create my plans, all right? So I got my important notes right there. This would have been for trading on March 11th, all right? And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just kind of write a story, all right? So then say that no more major news on the day, all right? And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to develop a game plan. Now, I like to write observations down, tell myself a story, and really kind of paint a picture of this market, okay? So what I can see clearly, if I go back into the higher time frame distribution, we see that yesterday, price traded above the value area high of the 4-hour sideways market, okay? Then we saw that there was strong selling forming new supply happened shortly after. Okay? So shortly after, forming new supply on the 1 hour and 5 minute happened shortly after. Okay? All right? So that's good there. So we just went and traversed the entire range of that value area. We got up to the value area high of the 4 hour. And then yesterday we saw that there was some really strong selling that happened after we stretched outside of that 4 hour value area. Okay. And then what we're going to see here is that we are still in a 15-minute distribution, and price is leaving the value area low of that 15-minute distribution overnight. So overnight, prices caught the value area high of the distribution, sold off all the way down to the value area low of the distribution, and now we're starting to pick back up. All right, now we're starting to pick back up. Okay. Distribution. Overall, overnight, the market traded throughout the 15-minute sideways distribution and caught a bottom at 5-minute demand. Okay? All right, and you should know where all those levels are because you already got them all marked out. All right, very good. Okay, so now we need to create some plans. Now, this one should be relatively easy, even though there was a lot going into this market. All right, there was a lot going into this planning process here. Since we are in kind of this double distribution, I'm going to be relatively more bearish than I am going to be bullish, right? Because if we're leaving the higher time frame distribution, then we will most likely start to traverse the entire range of that entire 4 hour sideways distribution. All right, and we can also see that prices are going to be opening high on the range. Overnight, we already caught these lows down here. Price is about to open up at 25.80 or so in the New York session. And if that continuation happens, then the first level I'm looking for shorts is at our 5-minute supply zone. All right. And let's just say that the market doesn't go up to that 5-minute supply zone and it starts to come down. Well, my levels of interest on this individual day are pretty simple, all right? I have the 5-minute demand zone. I have the 5 hour or the 5-minute and 1 hour supply zone above, and I'm just going to plan around these levels, all right? Now, there's multiple things that can happen in the market. I don't like to walk into the market with a bias, and that goes into my confirmation process, which is the last step of this, okay? So you have to imagine the potential scenarios that could happen in the market, right? If the market just stays in the middle here, I'm not really too interested in trades, all right? It's going to be at these extremes where the best trades happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to either wait for a some confirmation of selling activity up here and take a short, and I already know where I'm going to try to target that short towards the bottom of the range, okay? And that's going to give me good risk to reward. Another idea that could happen that I need to wait for is that what if we come up and we start to build value higher and then we break out, all right? If we break out to the upside, then I have an idea. I know how to get long, and I know my runway as well because I already have all of my other levels kind of marked out here. So if I can see that there's a strong rally, base, rally, then I can look to join that momentum all the way up to the next supply zone, which is the 4 hour, and that's going to give me an opportunity that way. All right. Now, let's just say the markets come down, right? Market opens, market comes down. Maybe we hold this. Maybe there's an opportunity to trade this thing back up. All right, maybe there's an opportunity to trade this thing back up. All right, what if the market comes down and then we actually build value down here and then we break through? All right, then I can actually look for shorts, looking for the bigger move down to the 1 hour. So I already have everything marked out. Now I just have to create that game plan. And this is based on supply and demand. It's based on trend. It's based on volume analytics. And then how I'm going to take trades is at when price gets to these levels of interest, I'm going to use order flow to get confirmation to either look for continuation on a move up through these levels or for confirmation of sellers, but I already know there's a potential to get long or short at these levels. All right. These are going to be my interesting levels because I am playing kind of this balanced market so far. All right. So then the last thing I'm going to do here is come up with a game plan. All right. So I got a bullish scenario. And my bullish scenario for this day would be that if price trades down to the 5-minute DZ, wait for confirmation before taking shorts, all right? And then you want to have your targets in there as well, all right? This one's a little confusing because if it just depends on how if price gets there first or if price gets there after hitting the high on the range. So I told you this is complicated. It takes a lot of years of trading to really understand what you're doing finally. Okay, so wait for confirmation before taking longs instead of shorts, longs. Okay, and then you'd put your targets in there. All right, and then also if buyers build value above 25,150, and break through yesterday's high, look for longs up to 4-hour supply. Okay, that's my bullish scenario on that day. All right, then I'm going to come up with my bearish scenario. Okay, my bearish scenario if price retests 5 or 1-hour supply, before getting short down to, we'll call it 24,940, above that demand zone, down to the 5-minute DZ. Okay, demand zone. Okay, all right, so that's one bear scenario. The 5-minute, and then if price comes down, one-hour demand. Okay, all right. And so these would be the scenarios here. All right. So if price, I'm going to go with the bullish scenario. If price trades down to the 5-minute demand zone, wait for confirmation before taking longs. All right. If buyers build value above 25,150 and break through yesterday's high, look for longs up to the 4-hour supply. All right. So I got two plans for each. I got a plan to get bullish if the markets go down. I got a plan to get bullish if the markets go up. Then for the bearish scenario, I have a plan to get bearish if the markets go down. I have a plan to get bearish if the markets are going up as well. So what we're looking at here is that the best quality setup, I've just removed bias here, right? Because anything can happen when the market opens. So what I'm waiting for at this point is that I'm going to wait for market open, and then I'm going to wait for prices to either come up to my level of interest for sells or my level of interest for buys. I'm going to wait for confirmation or wait for continuation. So that when price comes up to this level, it either rejects this level again and comes all the way back down and traverses the entire range, or we come up here, buyers accept these prices, we build value, and then we break out, right? And then either way, there's a trade setup, right? Either way, there's a trade setup. And so that's why I use order flow for confirmation, but I have a if this, then that scenario. And then the same is true. Price comes down here. All right, it might be a potential for longs. Okay. If price comes down here and we build value lower and break through, all right, now I'm looking for continuation shorts all the way down to the other demand level. Okay. So with all this in mind, this goes into my entire planning process. It's a complicated process. It takes a long time to kind of get to this level overall, but I promised some people that I would make a video on this process. So I don't know if it's going to help you, but hopefully it does. Thank you guys so much. We will catch you next time. And if we just push play in this market, of course, boom, this was a trading day, and both of those areas worked very nicely for trades if you were trading on a 1 minute chart or lower. All right, on a 1 minute chart or lower. Okay. All right, so that's going to cover that, and we will see you next time.